Welcome to today's podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to the wonderful Alice Kerridge-Crick about Mother Julian of Norwich. And the reason we've chosen to talk about her right now is because this is really her time of year. Alice is going to tell us a little bit more about her feast days, but it is a May entity that we are talking about here. Of course, most people think of her as a Christian saint, although technically she was never canonized and she is just known as Mother Julian, but lots of people call her Saint Julian anyway. But she's very important to us, and we think of her as one of the heroes of the city of Norwich itself, but also of the county of Norfolk, because she's just so important to the magical and spiritual life of the city. And I think it would be fair to say that Mother Julian appeals to Christians, to pagans, and to people of other religions as well, and also to people who don't have any particular kind of spirituality, but are just interested in spiritual exploration in its broader sense. So I did write a couple of pages about Mother Julian in Of Chalk and Flint, A Way of Norfolk Magic, but I'm going to hand over to Alice now and ask her to explain a little bit about who Mother Julian was, first of all. Welcome, Alice. So tell us a little bit about Mother Julian from your perspective.
Thank you, Val. Thank you for having me. Mother Julian is just like this most incredible woman who lived in the medieval time. She is an incredible medieval mystic or medieval visionary. So she was born in 1343 and she lived to 1416. That is, I think that's about, hopefully my math is right, it's about 73 years. And it's just like, that's just incredible for a medieval person to live that long.
that was a very good age at that time, especially given the fact that the Black Death did rage in the city during her lifetime.
And she's so important for us today as well, going through COVID. And I know a lot of people have come to us like through COVID, because she did just go through so many things in her lifetime. So she went through the Black Death and the plague. Some people sort of think she might have had a family and they died during one of these plagues, but we honestly don't know. But she was a mystic. And she is a mystic because when she became really ill, possibly from the plague, she had these mystical visions, 16 visions given to her at the age of 30. And they really imprinted on her a sense of, I don't know, a spirit from beyond. Because she is medieval, obviously we've got to understand her viewpoint is very much from a Christian perspective. And she sounds like she was always very devout. She always wanted 3 things to happen to her in her life. But she had these 16 visions and she wrote them quite soon after she had them in a short version. And then when she took up to being an anchoress at the age of, she was in her 40s when she turned into an anchoress, she decided to try a long version.
Yes, that was quite amazing. And I think one of the things that's so important about her and so inspirational is that, as far as we know, she is the first woman ever to write a book in English.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, first person to write in Middle English. And I think I've read somewhere that she was the first person to actually write the word enjoy. Obviously, enjoy comes from a Latin word, but she was the first person who wrote it in Middle English, which later obviously became the language which we use today. So I think that's amazing that she's gifted us this wonderful word, and I think it really sums up what she's about. She's about enjoyment and love. You know, when she wrote her book and people read it, it was groundbreaking. You know, her God, however she wanted to see it, however people wanted to see it, was about love, and it wasn't about being sinful or terrible. You know, there's some great quotes which I can say later on, but it was about love.
And yet, even though it was about love, having had her visions, she decided to become an anchorite and actually wall herself up in a cell next to the church in King Street. And that's quite an amazing thing to do, isn't it? And, you know, becoming an anchorite was a very drastic thing to do, really, wasn't it? Alice, perhaps you could explain a little bit about what it actually meant to be an anchorite.
Yeah, so an anchorite, in fact, Norwich was one of the most religious cities in the medieval period, and it actually had more recluses and anchorites than London and York combined. So she really lived in an era where there was lots of anchorites, and it was quite a serious thing to undertake. You know, anchorite or anchorage comes from a Greek word which means to withdraw, but also we sort of think of anchor as an anchor of the sea, and the fact that her cell was attached to the church at King Street. And now these little anchorite cells were really small. Julian's is about 9 by 12 feet. You can see a few of her cornerstones in her cell at the moment. They rebuilt it after the war because it got heavily damaged. The new one's about 11 by 14 feet.
So, yeah, sorry, is that actually bigger now than it was originally?
Yeah, it's actually bigger. It's about 2 feet bigger both sides. So it's almost like the new anchorage actually encases the old one. So it's like there's like a ghostly remains encased in the new flint walls.
That's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, and a lovely way of putting it as well.
Yeah, it's sort of spiritually there still. You know, it's like it's purposefully done that it's still bigger, as encased. It makes you sort of think of like those old shrines, really, in the cathedrals, don't you? How they just kept on getting encased.
Yes. And of course, it's a little bit like the idea of the Holy House in Walsingham, which is now encased in another church, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, anchorite was like such an undertaking to take. You know, you actually went through a ritual death. So it would start with a requiem mass. You'd be given the last rites. There'd be a sprinkling of ashes onto you as well to show that you have become dust to the outside world. And then yes, you're enclosed the rest of your life. And with either just windows, you know, some anchorite cells, just windows, one window for food and waste and one window to take the Eucharist. It's possible that Julian actually had a door and it was bolted because she actually had 2 maids, not at the same time. But I really love this because she had 2 maids, and one was called Alice and one was called Sarah. And I've got a friend, Sarah, who I met there. So I think that's just amazing. It's just like, so she might have possibly have had a door, possibly. Because we also know of Julian because another contemporary medieval mystic, Marjorie Kemp, came to visit her. And we don't know whether it was they talked just through the window or whether there was this door and actually they sat together.
I was going to ask you that because when Marjorie famously visited Mother Julian from King's Lynn, of course, because you know Marjorie was another Norfolk mystic, wasn't she? But I was actually going to ask you because she was there for quite a long time, wasn't she? Several days, in fact. And so I was going to ask whether you thought she went inside the cell or whether she just sat outside the whole time.
I like the idea that she might have gone in, you know, even if it was just windows. reading Marjorie Kemp's book, I can quite imagine her squeezing herself through a window, actually.
Yes, and she herself was really quite a character, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was quite a character, and almost in some respects quite opposite to Julian. You read sort of Marjorie's book and it's quite racy, it's quite erotic. You can understand why she got in trouble a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. But I mean, given the time and the number of people who were burned in the city for heresy, mainly for being lollards. I mean, some of the things that Mother Julian wrote, and Marjorie as well, of course, were, they were quite dangerous, really, weren't they, for their own safety?
They were really dangerous. I got a fantastic quote which I can read to you about that. But yeah, it's quite interesting with Marjorie. We know that Marjorie visited Julian and she asked Julian to make sure that her visions weren't false, but she never actually mentions that Julian ever told her any of hers. And it's probably quite likely at this time Marjorie was actually under investigation for being a lollard, and it was probable that Julian did not share any of hers because she didn't want to be yanked out of her cell and charged herself. So I think Julian is quite a cautious person. I think he's cautious. But this is all right if I read out this quote, which is actually
please do.
I actually read this out when I actually played her as well, and I just think it's so fantastic, and it shows her gutsiness. It goes, "But God forbid that you should say or take it so that I am a teacher, for I do not mean so, nor have I ever meant so. For I am a woman, unlettered, feeble, and frail. But I know well this, that I say I have received it from the showing of him who is sovereign teacher. But truthfully, charity stirs me to tell it to you. For I would God were known, and mine even Christians helped, as I would be myself, to the greater hating of sin and loving of God. But because I am a woman, should I therefore believe that I should not tell you the goodness of God, since I saw it in that same time of revelations, that it is his will that it be known?" And I think, that is like, good on you, Julian. She's herself.
Yes, so determined. So determined to get her message out there, even though she lived at a time when women were not allowed to preach.
Yeah, and I love it that she actually calls herself feeble and unlettered, which obviously she most definitely isn't, because she actually knew how to write. She knew how to write, which is so rare for anybody in the medieval period, let alone a woman.
Yes, but as you say, she was being very cautious and perhaps weaving a little bit of a glamour about herself to keep her safe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a lot of glamour and weaving which she makes. Definitely. What's interesting as well is the year Julian gets her visions is actually the same year Marjorie Kemp is born. And I think that's such a magical coincidence.
Yes, and a very strong connection between the two of them, in fact.
Yeah, it's like this magical thread of these two pillars of mystical experience. I think it's quite magical.
So can you tell us a little bit about the things that are associated with her that make her magical and that can help us to work with her today?
Yeah, so her associations, a lot of people associate her with cats. So a lot of cat magic is really, really important for her. So if you've got an ill familiar, she is a fantastic person to go to magically to ask for protection and healing of that cat. I have used her and petitioned her in the past, and because of her association with cats, you can think of her as a protector of boundaries and keeping an area or somewhere safe as well, because obviously cats have always through millennia been guardians of doorways and gateways, so she's like a guardian of knowledge.
Absolutely,
So
yeah, and a guardian of her own very special kind of magic.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's got quite a gentle magic, but you know, there's a force in her which is like a wave, really. You can't stop it from happening.
It's interesting that you say like a wave, because of course, you know, when we've worked with her magically in ritual, you know, and with the other heroes of the county that we like to work with, of course, we have Will Kemp, you know, the dancer in the east, and we have Boudica, the warrior queen in the south, Robert Kett as the earth force who worked for, you know, the good of the people, and for justice for all, and rights to the land for all. So he's a very earthy character. But Mother Julian we've always had in the West, in the place of water, and that's one of the associations that I have for her. And that links back to what you were saying earlier, doesn't it, about her being very much associated with love?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's definitely got this sort of water element of gentleness and fierceness. And actually, interestingly, I always find when I'm in her cell or shrine, however you'd like to sort of call it, I always feel like I'm in a ship in the clouds. You know, I can travel there in my mind and astrally, just because I can just remember the sound of her cell. It's just incredible. So if anybody ever gets a chance to go there, really sort of sit in there and listen, because the noises turn into timeless noises, you know, the same sorts of noises you'd have heard in medieval times. But there's this really quiet echoing and gushing of the wind on the roof, which makes you think that you are in a ship and you're floating in clouds. It's just incredible. Really magical.
And given that you haven't been able to go there for well over a year now, it's a very good thing that you are able to tap into that energy without actually being there physically, isn't it?
Yes, very safe. It's very socially distanced.
So I believe the shrine up on King Street is now open again. I haven't actually been up there myself to have a look, but I think it has now opened. People are allowed to go in there once again, which is nice to know.
Yeah, that's lovely to know, isn't it? I can't wait to go back.
So cats are one of her magical associations, but of course the other important one is the hazelnut, isn't it?
It is, yeah. She compares everything to the hazelnut. I have got the quote which actually has the hazelnut in it. And this is probably one of the things she's most famous for. She's famous for two quotes, particularly, but this one is probably one of the most magical ones, because yes, it's the hazelnut, and it goes, "For he showed me." Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
That's Julian ringing.
That was a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah. Right, I do apologise. Right, so the quote goes with the hazelnut: "For he shewed me a little thing, the quantity of a hazelnut in the palm of my hand, and it was as round as a ball. I looked at it with my eye of understanding and thought, what is this? And it was answered generally thus: it is all that is made. And I know it lasts and ever shall last, because God loves it." Which is, you know, it's incredible, you know. Again, the hazelnut in Celtic, northern traditions is like a symbol of wisdom.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
isn't it amazing that, you think of the church perhaps, as not being fantastically interested in magical stuff, and even, being against it in many ways. But if you go to the shrine on King Street, there is always a little bowl of hazelnuts, isn't it? And an invitation to take one home with you as a lucky charm in memory of Julian.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. In fact, I've got a miracle hazelnut which has survived when even its container has completely rotted away. And it survived. It stays on my writing desk now. It's just like an incredible survivor of everything
Mm.
else disappears, but that survived.
That's fantastic. I'd love to know actually if the church gets those hazelnuts from any particular tree, because they're quite large actually, aren't they? And I wonder where the trees they get it from, and whether that has some special meaning that they're not actually telling people.
I know, yeah, I'd love to know that as well. I'd love to know. It's just like, is this a tree which they've got in actually their little garden they've got, or is it where is this tree? Where are these hazelnuts from? Yeah, I'd love to know that.
Yes, I
Um,
mean, you've mentioned that famous quote, and perhaps you'd like to mention the other quotation, which is perhaps even more famous, and the thing that I think people are really drawn to, if they know nothing else about her, they tend to know that, don't they? So
they
perhaps
do, yeah. So the one which people know the best is just the 12th revelation, and it's in chapter 27 of her book, and it goes, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, which is just so beautiful. It's a good mantra for everybody to sort of say it on your prayer beads or your rosary. It's a good mantra to have.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, the
Yeah.
words, oh sorry.
No, go on. You can continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's interesting, the words before it and afterwards, because it actually talks about sin and suffering, and the words afterwards is actually that Jesus actually doesn't class these as our fault or our problems, which is quite radical and quite against the religious teachings of the time, but it's quite of the Gnostic tradition, which I find quite interesting. Obviously, Gnostic isn't actually one tradition, it's a modern concept that Gnostics was a one tradition, which isn't true. It's a range of different teachings which got banned and hidden, but we now call it Gnostic. But yeah, her words, which Julian uses, is very similar to the early teachings, which obviously didn't make it to the modern times
Yeah,
so much.
yeah, absolutely. And what I like about that little quotation, because it's very shorter than the hazelnut one, of course, people often have it inscribed on jewelry to keep with them as a lucky charm, don't they?
They do. In fact, actually, I'm wearing the bracelet today.
Ah.
There's a silver bracelet which I always wanted. I've never been able to get it, and then the evening before I gave up my job, one came available on a well-known auction site, and it was a sign. It was a
Brilliant.
sign on my last day of my new journey.
Yes, yes. So we'll talk a little bit about your new journey in a moment when we finish talking about Mother Julian. You could talk a little bit about how you work in your own art and so on. But perhaps before we finish talking about Mother Julian herself, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about her feast day, because I always think of her feast day as being the 8th of May, which is why I wanted to do this podcast at this particular time. But you have some very specific ideas about this time period, don't you?
It's interesting actually, her feast days. So her feast day in the Anglican and Lutheran Church is the 8th of May. And in a Catholic tradition, it's actually the 13th of May. And I always wondered why this is, you know, whether it's a change of calendar system, but looking into it, it's interesting that actually the 8th of May is, there's different manuscripts which have survived of Julian's work, and her two long text ones, one is known as the Sloane manuscript in the British Library, and that's the one which has got the date of the 8th, and the Paris Codex, which is obviously in France, is the 13th. So it's just like, that answers.
Oh, well, thank you. That's I didn't know that, actually. So that explains why she has two different feast days. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only just discovered that myself, and I thought, that answers. Thank you, Mother Julian. You've answered this question.
But you said the other day that you feel that the whole of May is important to her.
I do, and I think you can work between the 8th and the 13th as like a specific week to work with her magically. So what you could do is, because she had a window to the outside world, and she talked through a black veil, which is just like in itself, it's a very magical wisdom is behind a veil. So with that in mind, you can have like a whole week of asking, lighting a candle, saying a prayer, or however feels right for you. I think with Mother Julian, it is what works for you and what feels right in your heart. So you can work with her with a repetition for the days between the 8th and the 12th, and then on the 12th night, so you've got the 12th night and then the 13th morning, which is the beginning of her Catholic feast day, you can ask for the wisdom of Julian to enlighten you during the sleep. So if you've got any like questions you need to ask her, or a decision like, should I plant an apple tree or a pear tree, or should I move house, or, you know, anything from mundane to really important decisions, you can ask for her to reveal her wisdom through the black veil on the 13th, but to remember to particularly ask for her blessings in that week between. And it's also a nice time to read more about her and how you can embody her in your own life as well. And I think that's how some of the wisdom comes from behind the black veil.
That's beautiful. That's a really lovely idea for anybody who's got who's got time and the need to really go into working with her in that kind of depth. It's lovely indeed. And in my experience, she's a very gentle force to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. She is really gentle. I think her gentleness really shows with how you work with her magically. You know, she's quite forgiving. You know, if you've forgotten something, I don't think she would hold it against you. And I also work with her magically as she's an emanation of the landscape, but also of Idun as well. You know, in Norse mythology, you know, I think there's a good connection between them, because obviously Idun got turned into a hazelnut as well. So there's that hazelnut imagery and her wisdom. And I think Julian, how she changed God into a feminine, loving God as well, is a bit like how Loki slips between genders and makes things happen which needs to happen. Julian made what needed to happen herself. And when Loki takes Idun to the frost giant, he is taking knowledge away from the gods, because maybe the gods have forgotten themselves what they need. And obviously knowledge is youth. If you don't keep keep your knowledge and keep learning, you age yourself. So when Loki brings Idun back, she is no longer just the apple maiden. She has been turned into the hazelnut, which is the wisdom of the knowledge. So bringing her back, he has brought back the wisdom to keep yourself young and keep yourself in a long life, like Julian had. Julian had a long life. She was Idun in her time period.
Well, absolutely. I mean, she had a long life in that physical incarnation, but she is still, in some respects, alive and with us now, because we have her books, we have her assistance. We have so many things, her sayings, her wisdom. It's always with us, isn't it? And with so many people in the city of Norwich and more widely as well.
Yeah, as you say, everybody of all faiths and no faiths absolutely love her. She is still alive in people's hearts. Those apple seeds and hazelnuts have been spread quite widely.
Definitely. And you're the only person I know, Alice, who has actually had the experience of invoking Mother Julian into themselves in a magical ritual, which was a pre-Yule ritual a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Perhaps you'd like to just tell us a little bit more about that and what the experience was like.
It was incredible. It was a lovely ritual, because it was the wise woman through the ages, and it was a real honor to be able to embody Julian, to also get to know her more personally as well. And she is that quietness and that lightness. And obviously I'd done like a lot of research on her beforehand, and that is like one of her gifts, really, is that by knowing her, you want that knowledge. And her calmness of speech, because normally I'm quite an nervous person, but actually embodying her and being her in the ritual, I was quite calm, and I wasn't necessarily aware of the people around me. I was speaking as Julian at that time. I was asking people what would they be willing to give up, and what gifts do they wish to receive in the light. She is embodying Julian, shows like this quietness and this strength, and asking other people to be active in their own magical life and their own magical will as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was truly amazing, because one of the things that we should perhaps add is that you actually dressed up as her, and as the ritual progressed, you actually began to look like some of the medieval pictures, or the reimagined medieval pictures of her. You took on that aspect of her physically, as well as in other kind of spiritual, magical ways. So it was really quite dramatic, and I think lots of people noticed it. So it was a wonderful piece of magic.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I definitely felt that sort of loosening of myself into her.
So just to bring our little chat to a close, what if you would just say a couple of things that you would like people to kind of take with them from this magically, about her importance to us as pagans and witches.
As pagans and witches, she is about inclusiveness. She's about broadening our horizons in our search for knowledge, and maybe looking somewhere we thought we already knew about. Magically, it is have your familiar with you, work with your familiar.
Yes, and of course that is so important, isn't it? And you know, we're using familiar in its kind of loosest sense, where we mean you know, actually a physical animal companion as well as spirit animal companions and imps and such like.
Yeah,
So I'm
absolutely.
sure Mother Julian would not have liked us to use the word imp about.
No, no, she might have been a bit like, oh, I don't know what to say about that. So yeah, I think her gifts, which actually comes through her book, is the worst things we can do is ignorance and slothfulness. So her magic is to keep knowledge, to write, and don't be slothful in coming forward, of being who you are. So it's about being yourself, encompassing your true self and letting go of the ego, really. So it's removal of ignorance and slothfulness.
Well, that's lovely. That's a lovely thought to end on. So, Alice, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience of Mother Julian at her special time of year. And perhaps just before you go, you'd like to say a little bit about your work, about your Instagram page, and about your art and craft work and what you have on Etsy, because people, you know, having heard you talk, might well be interested in following up some of your other work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so what I work on now is introducing people that actually the divine feminine never left us. You know, I think a lot of people think through Christianity, deities and the feminine got lost, and actually they didn't. We have, like in Norfolk particularly, we have this amazing rich tradition of female saints. So it's bringing people back to knowing the magic in their own land and in their own country, and that it never left us. Obviously, being a female, it is mainly female work which I do. So you can find me on the Spikenard Way on Instagram. I've called it the Spikenard Way because it's Mary Magdalene's sacred plant, and it's a plant from the Himalayas, and it got used obviously in India and Nepal, and it found its way into Egypt and is associated with Bast and Hathor, and then now more latterly with Mary Magdalene. So it's like this pathway of ancient wisdom through the ages. I've got 2 other accounts. I look after the Norwich Pagan Moot account, so you can always find me on there as well and say hello to everybody at the Pagan Moot. And I've also got a personal account, which is Little Lynette, which obviously is a bit more geekified and a bit more witchified. But yeah, I do believe, and a lot of my work now is bringing people back to understanding that divinity takes many forms, and actually it's not always about another country has a more inclusive and a better way of doing things. It's actually here as well. We just need to look for it and actually see that actually some of these saints are embodiments of the land which we live in, which I know that you very much believe in as well.
Absolutely, yes. Well, thank you for that. And what's lovely, of course, is that when you gave up your day job, as it were, to do this full time, you had that special blessing from Mother Julian on your work.
Yes, yeah, I thought it was perfect. So thank you, Mother
really
Julian.
Lovely. Okay, Alice, well, thank you very much for joining me and for making this podcast and for sharing your wonderful knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye.
Goodbye.